Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight on the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. Today's episode, we will be talking about the St. Brigid's Church, located in Amherst, Massachusetts. So, what is the history of the St. Brigid's Church in Amherst?
Alright, this is a wonderful church in Amherst, but it serves many different communities, so that's important to keep in mind. And we're going to talk about its history, the architectural style used in the church, and then what cemetery it uses, and then what might be the future of this wonderful church. And so the history of the church, St. Brigid's, is such. It's a very old place. It was started in 1869 in Amherst. And it started up about 200 yards from its present location towards the north on a Pleasant Street Green. And it was called it still is called North Pleasant Street over there. And it started as a community of religious believers. In 1871, they finally got their church finished off. And it was a wooden clapboard church. And it was rather small. And can you imagine how it outgrew? Because in came the immigrants. First came, of course, the Irish. And they were living up in Amherst, Hadley area, mostly because they wanted to become farmers. So not all the immigrants, the Irish, French Canadians, and Polish, went to work in the mills of the mill cities and towns. Some wanted farms, because that's what they did back in their home country. And they swarmed into Hadley and Amherst and started to farm. Now, the congregation of people grew and grew, and by the early 1900s, it grew so large that they really needed a new church for themselves. And so they had plans to build a new church, and in 1923 that finally came to a head. It finally was able to make its brand new church, and that's the one that's standing up there now. It's a very gorgeous church, of course, and it's celebrating its 100th year last year, which is wonderful. It still looks like it's in great shape. The rectory is right to its left-hand side, and there's a social center in the very, very back itself.
And what architectural style is in the use of the church?
Okay, so if you look at the church itself, the style is very unique. You have to pull back a little bit, go across the street, get an angle, and you can see that it has some sort of steeple in the back. Now, the kind of church might be called a Romanesque church. It's very hard to say, but most of the windows are rounded, so for that reason, it has that style. But if you look at the steeple style, it almost looks like it's a Middle Eastern style. So it's using a variety of style to get across its architecture.
And before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any various tours, check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and texts of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, @yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, what cemetery does this parish use?
In Hadley, Massachusetts, is a cemetery called the St. Brigid's Cemetery, and that's the cemetery that this church uses. And so it's a different town, and it has become a large location, and it takes in all the different immigrants, so it's not for one ethnic group, it's for the Irish, Polish, and French Canadians. And it serves all the communities that belong to St. Brigid's, which through its history has been Hadley, Amherst, Sunderland, Shutesbury, Leverett, Belchtown, and Pelham. So it serves many communities, and it still does. And so in that cemetery, you're going to find very many different communities are there. So you find death certificates from a lot of different communities. And that's so many ethnic groups, many different communities, no set one. So for that reason, it's a very eclectic cemetery.
And what is the future of this church?
Okay, the future is bright for the church because it's in a very active community of Amherst, and it needs lots of different churches for all the many students that go there. There's 3 colleges in that area. And for that reason, you can bet that they'll try to keep this church open as much as possible. And they do change with times as much as possible, but the Catholic Church, which is a very traditional system anyways, and so you can only change so much. And there's much competition around the area. There's right across the street the Unitarian Church. There's also Congregational Church. There's also Episcopal Church, the Baptist Church, so forth. So it has so much competition, and a lot of students quite easily change around. But it serves 9 different communities, and that's a big plus because you're drawing from a large geographic size, which have a reasonable high population.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of expertise. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in as well. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again. Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, and what life was like in the industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I'm your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout Massachusetts. Currently, the communities that he focuses on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours focus on the canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as parks, houses, and streets. He personally gives all of his presentations and tours himself. So in today's episode, we'll be discussing the St. Brigid's Cemetery, located in the community of Hadley. So, who does this cemetery serve?
That's a very good question because it has the same name as a church in Amherst, so people think that the cemetery serves parishioners from Amherst, but that's incorrect. And so I'll tell you what they serve. Now, along the way today, we're going to talk about the history of the cemetery, and then what are some of the peculiar features of the cemetery, and also about, there's no pastors here. And so, who does it serve? It serves the people from a large geographic area. In particular, it serves Pelham, parts of western Belchertown, all of Amherst, all of Hadley, some of the southern portions of Sunderland, all of Leverett, and all of Shutesbury. Now, it does this because very few Catholics settled in this region, and so they had to build the St. Brigid's Church somewhat towards the center of population, not the geographic center of those 7 communities I just listed. So it serves all those communities, and the cemetery serves all those communities through time. It hasn't served them in the sense of equally because Amherst and Hadley were much bigger than the other ones I listed. So Even though there's a cemetery in Hadley named St. Brigid's, and it has the same name as the one in Amherst, they are related. This is a cemetery of that church, but it serves 7 different communities. So keep that in mind if you go through there, or if you're listening to my podcasts or videos.
And tell us about the history of the cemetery.
From 1870 to 1938, the St. Brigid's Cemetery was the only Catholic cemetery in Hadley, Amherst, Leverett, Belchertown, Sunderland, Shutesbury, and it thus has all the very old burials of the ethnic groups that it served: the Polish, the French Canadians, and the Irish. And it holds the old burials of all Catholics from that area, because for a long time it was the only Catholic church. I believe it was the 19 teens until another Catholic church came around, and that was in Hadley. When the Holy Rosary Church was started in Hadley in 1916, it did not start up its own cemetery right away. It waited 22 more years to 1938. Then it started up the Holy Rosary Cemetery, which is only about 200 yards away to the west of the St. Brigid's Cemetery in Hadley. And it's also in Hadley, the St. Rosary Cemetery and Church. And Hadley has such a high Catholic population in Amherst, or those other communities, Pelham, Leverett, Shutesbury, so forth, especially in that early period from 1870s, 1930s. Thus, the vast majority of the burials in the St. Brigid's Cemetery, of the very old burials, pre-1938, are from people from Hadley. Then, the second most geographic area served would be Amherst, and then all the other smaller communities that are listed along the way. Right, the parish that's called St. Brigid's Parish, all that it had as church in Amherst, served all these communities. And for that reason, you'll find 7 different communities' burials of Catholics in this one cemetery. All right, but by far it served Hadley because it was the largest population of Catholics, even though Amherst probably had a larger population overall. All right, now I want you to keep that in mind when you look around here, because it's like a few other cases. For instance, Holyoke has 3 cemeteries in South Hadley, 3 Catholic cemeteries. So this is a very similar situation, except the geographic size of the communities it served is vast.
So, quickly before we continue with our interview, just to fill our listeners in, for more information or to sign up for various tours, check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org, and there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each tour, as well as photos and text of the historical sites as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, @yahoo.com. His tours make for fun educational outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, what are some of the peculiar features of the cemetery?
Okay, when you walk into the front gates, which are at a busy intersection, and don't try to go out that same gate. It's actually a one-way gate going in. All right, on that gate, pillars, you'll see in memory of James and Mary White, and then another pillar says memory of Mary and Alice White. And when you walk in, maybe 10 steps and look to the left, you'll see a big gravestone monument devoted to the White family. So you can actually see the memorials of this family. Now, another peculiar feature of the cemetery is for 3 different ethnic groups. Because it's such a wide geographic area, and the second cemetery of the area for Catholic did not come around in 1938, then you'll find the Polish, you'll find the French Canadians, and the oldest ones of all, you'll find the Irish. And a lot of these Irish were from Hadley. And then another peculiar feature that you don't always find in most cemeteries, but in Catholic cemeteries you do, especially the old cemeteries, the babies are buried in the very, very back, and they're in a non-holy section. And so they were buried, since they weren't baptized in time, they were buried in a special place, and the section is only for these young infants. And it's even behind the section that's saved for a potter's field, which are paupers' graves. And so that is towards the back and maybe a bit towards the left.
And why are there any pastors of the St. Brigid's Church buried here?
There's no pastors here. And the reason why is because it's such a vast geographic size. Parents never specialize to one single community and one single ethnic group. And when that happens in a Catholic environment, usually the cemetery doesn't have many pastors that want to get buried there. The families don't want to bury them, or their request from the pastor is to bury them with their family somewhere else. So I've looked through the cemetery. No pastors of St. Brigid are buried in St. Brigid's Cemetery. And that's kind of sad. But there is, towards the center of the cemetery, a large stone cross, which kind of makes up for a typical priest circle that a lot of the Catholic cemeteries have. And if you visit that, it's kind of also separating. The old Polish are towards the back left of that section. The old French Canadians are to the slightly front left of that section. The old Irish are towards the front left of that cross section. And the very modern bearers are almost all towards the right. And so there's no central location in the cemetery because of lack of pastures, but there is quite a distinct separation by ethnic groups than Potter's Field and baby graves. And I hope you do enjoy going there. It's kind of well taken care of. I wish they get new grass for the cemetery. That's it.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And thank you to our sponsors. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of other podcasts at his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again.